Yes, thank you. So, thank you for the introduction. I'm Tomoki, the second author of this paper. And the title of our paper is Multiverse Notebook. And Multiverse Notebook is a computational notebook environment that we developed in our research. And let me start my talk with a brief introduction to computational notebooks. So a computational notebook is a nice programming environment with excellent interactivity. And Jupyter Notebook is a famous example. And in that environment, programmers can try ideas and get feedbacks quickly without leaving the notebook view. So the figure at the bottom here illustrates that interactivity. And this is an example notebook working on a machine learning task. And in the first cell, some data is loaded into variable x and y. And then x is binarized in the second cell. And in the third cell, the bottom cell, a machine learning model is trained using the binarizer data. And at the output, the programmer got an accuracy score of 0.5, which is not as good as expected. So the programmer then thinks about alternatives and come up with an idea of using data normalization. So the programmer can try that new idea just by editing the second cell and executing the bottom cells without leaving the notebook view. So this interactivity is very appreciated by data scientists in industry, not only by students in classrooms. So computational notebook is a nice programming environment, but we have to mind the gap between when using computational notebooks. We have to mind the gap between source code in the notebook view and the kernel state behind the notebook view. So let's see this video here to check what I'm talking about. So this is a screen recording of Jupyter Notebook. And in this example, x is first initialized to 10, and then x is multiplied by 2. And the output is 20. So this is just as expected. But the gap appears when the programmer deletes code and tries another code. So x is now divided by 2, and the output is 10. So we got 10. But this output is not explainable or reproducible from the source code in this notebook here. So because x is first set to 10 and then divided by 2. So the explainable or reproducible output is 5, but we got 10. So this is due to the gap between the source code and the kernel state behind the notebook view. So in existing environment like Jupyter Notebook, the programmer can rewind the source code, but cannot rewind the kernel state. So this difference causes the gap between the source code and the kernel state. So when using a notebook, when using a computational notebook, we have to pay attention to the gap to keep outputs explainable and reproducible. But why do we have to struggle with the gap just for keeping the explainability and reproducibility of outputs? We don't want to do that. We don't want to do such burdensome tasks if possible. So that is the motivation for the development of our research artifact, Multiverse Notebook. So Multiverse Notebook is a Multiverse Notebook is a computational notebook without a gap between the source code and the kernel state. So since there is no gap in Multiverse Notebook, we do not have to pay attention to the gap for to keep outputs explainable and reproducible. So let's check the same example in Multiverse Notebook. And this is a screen recording of our artifact, Multiverse Notebook. And x is first initialized to 10, and then multiplied by 2. And the output is, of course, 20. And in Multiverse Notebook, the gap does not appear even when code is deleted. So x divided by 2 is, the output is 5, so which is explainable and reproducible from the source code in this notebook. And we made this possible by implementing or developing a notebook kernel with time-traveling feature. So in Multiverse Notebook, we rewind the kernel state to keep the consistency between source code and the kernel state. So that's so we developed Multiverse Notebook, a computational notebook without the gap between source code and the kernel state. That's an extreme summary of our work. But let me describe more about our work from a research perspective. So as I said, Multiverse Notebook is our research artifact, and it is made of 2 components. And the first component is the front-end notebook user interface. But in this component, there is nothing new. Nothing is new in this component. But in the second component, the back-end Python notebook kernel with the time-traveling feature, includes 2 research contributions. And we, for this notebook kernel, this notebook kernel with a time-traveling feature, we developed implementation technique of efficient time traveling. And we also empirically evaluated our notebook kernel that we developed using real-world notebooks collected from the internet. And our paper also presents quantitative analysis of real-world notebook revisions. And this is an empirical foundation that validates the design of Multiverse Notebook. But I will skip this part, the contribution 3. I will skip this part to fit my talk within the time frame given to me. But instead, I will talk about the first 2 contributions about the notebook kernel. I will talk about these 2 for in the rest of my talk. Okay. So how we implemented the time-traveling feature. So the key idea is to use the fork system call for checkpointing. So in Multiverse Notebook, each cell is executed in a different process. A cell is executed in a child process forked from the parent cell's process. So for example, the second cell in the first figure up there is executed in a child process forked from the first cell's process. And the bottom cell in the first figure is executed in a child process forked from the second cell process. So Multiverse Notebook use a different process to execute each cell. And time traveling in Multiverse Notebook is realized just by creating a new process, new child process from the parent process. So this is how Multiverse Notebook rewinds the kernel state. And this technique, using the fork system call, runs very fast because there is no reverse computation for time traveling, and there is no computational overhead for state serialization. And furthermore, there is no physical memory copy on creating a new process because the fork system call employs the copy on write strategy. So Multiverse Notebook creates live in-memory checkpoints by using the fork system call. That's the key idea behind. That's the key idea of our time traveling feature. But that's not all about our time traveling feature. And we made further improvement on memory efficiency. So since we wanted to use Multiverse Notebook to perform data science tasks in the real world, we chose to support Python in Multiverse Notebook. But there were 2 problems when mixing the fork system call and CPython. CPython is a standard implementation of Python. And there were problems when mixing the fork system call and CPython. More specifically, the copy on write strategy by the fork system call does not function well with the garbage collection system in CPython. So because CPython uses reference counting to manage memories, but manage objects, but so it performs memory writes when reading objects at the Python level. And furthermore, CPython runs a cyclic garbage collector periodically, and so it performs memory writes when marking objects on traversing object graph. So because of those behavior of a garbage collection system in CPython, the copy on write strategy by the fork system call is not copy on write anymore. Because, the copy on write strategy becomes copy on read or copy on traverse by reference counting and cyclic garbage collector. So there were obvious memory inefficiency when mixing the fork system call and the CPython. So to mitigate these problems, our notebook kernel immortalized objects taken over from parent cells. So our notebook kernel excludes parent cells object from garbage collection targets. And the idea behind this strategy is that from a child process, objects in parent cells or parent processes cannot be garbage collected anyway. So that's the key idea for this strategy. And for this immortalization of objects, our notebook kernel, we developed a technique to efficiently immortalize objects. And our notebook kernel associates a cell with a specific memory region and immortalize objects by extending the tenure region. And that's how our kernel immortalizes objects in parent cells. And to summarize, we identify the problems of when mixing the fork system call and the CPython, and we developed a new technique to efficiently immortalize objects and to mitigate the memory inefficiency. And yes, and I'm running out of time, so let me quickly talk about our empirical evaluation. And we empirically evaluated our notebook kernel by replaying revisions of 10 notebooks collected from Kaggle. Kaggle is a famous data science platform mainly for data science competitions. And the notebooks we used in our evaluation are relatively small on Kaggle, but they are not too small. The median time for replaying those revisions were 200 seconds, and the maximum time required was more than 30 minutes, so 2,000 seconds. And the space to replay those revisions, the median space was 8 gigabytes, and the maximum space, the highest space, was largest space, was 60 gigabytes. So I think I can say that these notebooks are too small. And the bottom part is highlight of our experimental results. I just picked up 2 results from our large experiments. And the first result is that the checkpointing by the fork system call is several times faster than state serialization, which is a naive technique for checkpointing. And our GC strategy reduced a large amount of space compared to vanilla CPython, and the median reduction was 6.5%. And in the best case, our strategy reduced more than 50% of physical memory usage. And this is the summary of our work. And so the extreme summary of our work is we developed Multiverse Notebook. a computational notebook without the gap between the source code and kernel state. And in that environment, you don't have to care about the gap to keep the consistency, the explainability and reproducibility. And so the QR code there is the link to our web page that lists our paper and repository and the video. So please check that web page for more information. And thank you for listening.
Questions? Will? Hi, Will from Brown. So I'm trying to understand how this would interact with external stateful objects. For instance, let's say in one cell, I open a file, then I make a second cell that closes that file. Then I delete that cell, I create a new second cell that tries to read from that file. If I understand it correctly, that file descriptor would be closed, and there's not really a way you can sort of rewind that fact. Is that the case? Like, is this only sort of correct with respect to like objects defined within Python and not to things that involve like syscalls or stuff like that?
So yes, as I said, we cannot take file descriptors over another cell.
Yeah.
So that's the limitation by introduced by using the fork system code. But
right.
In our notebook environment, Multiverse Notebook, it's the closing the file descriptors is user's responsibility. So users of Multiverse Notebook users have to close file descriptor before creating a new cell under the cell.
And is there any way for the user to know which kinds of data like is safe for them to ignore versus they need to handle more carefully?
I'm not sure if it's understandable to users, but our notebook throws an error when file descriptors, extra file descriptors are opened when at the end of cell execution. So at least the users can find out something is open. But I don't know if that message is user-friendly or not. So that was not evaluated in our experiment.
All right, thanks.
Hello, thank you for the talk and sharing your clever technique. I wanted to ask, I guess I'm sort of elaborating on Will's question. So for instance, so if a user writes to a file, right, in one cell and then reads from that file in another, right, then it's also not possible to just rewind the cell that writes to another file, right, and so on, right? So in your Oh, okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay, is this a backup site or did I miss one?
Yeah.
Because I was going to ask if you found like some notebooks which were actually writing to files like that, and if you did, then were you planning to mitigate it somehow?
Yes, yes. The answer is our notebook. So let me summarize first. Our notebook just rewinds only memory state, so it doesn't care about, doesn't do anything for external files. But our quantitative analysis of real-world notebook, which is the analysis of notebooks collected from Kaggle, we found no problematic notebook revisions that interacts with files. And more specifically, 20% of notebooks do not create files, and 50% of notebooks do not read files, just creating files for keeping the outputs to be used somewhere else. So, and we found in 30% of notebooks, created files are read in another cell, but those cells are executed at the same time, so there was no we couldn't find a problematic notebook due to the external files.
Thank you.